He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Hey YouTube, it's me here again, and today I'm going to be talking about one of the more well-known Marvel villains, and he's a very special character, one that has appeared in several books over the relatively short time that he's been in comics. He first appeared, I believe, during the 70s, and he became rather prominent during Frank Miller's Daredevil run, and that character is Bullseye. And this character was requested to me by B-Rated Bad Guy. And why he requested me to do this character, that sort of confuses me, because he already did a video about this character himself, and it was fabulous. I'm not exactly sure how much of a better job I could do, but I'll give it a shot. Bullseye was sort of... He has a very... Bullseye's past is mostly unknown, but given from what little information we've had, Bullseye grew up in the Bronx in New York, and he had a very crappy family. His dad was a very abusive alcoholic, and the one person he really cared about the most was his brother, who was a big gun aficionado, and because of this he learned to shoot guns very good. And this was sort of the roots as to where he got his incredible marksmanship. At one point, Bullseye helped his brother burn down the house that his dad lived in, and then they were relocated into a foster home. Eventually, Bullseye, when he was in high school, he joined the baseball team. The baseball team, he was very good at baseball. In fact, he was so good that he was offered a scholarship. He was one of the best pitchers on his team. In fact, he was the best pitcher on his team. He was the best high school pitcher that ever lived. However, he actually grew bored of baseball, and during one of the minor league games, when he pitched 2 outs, he actually wanted to quit, and the person in charge of the game wouldn't let him. And there was another person on the opposite team who was making fun of him because they thought he was a pansy. So he was pissed off about this, so he threw the ball so hard that he hit him in the face and he killed him. And then when this happened, the only thing he said was the word Bullseye. Hence the origin of his name, I guess you could say. Now, when this happened, he ended up in jail. But he was actually recruited into a government agency, and he became a government agent for a while. But then eventually he branched off and he became a professional assassin, becoming more like the Bullseye that we all know and love. Before he became an assassin, though, he spent more of his days as a government agent in Mexico, working as basically a Contra, and he was a very corrupt Contra. And when that happens, he actually comes across the Punisher, Frank Castle, and he has sort of a near-death experience with the Punisher, and so this causes him to sort of rethink his strategy. So he decides to relocate to New York City, and he creates a costume, and he establishes an identity for himself and calls himself Bullseye. And at this point, he establishes himself as one of the main baddest assassins in New York, working for the Kingpin. And over the years, he would cause a lot of grief for a Daredevil. I mean, he would don the Daredevil costume. He would actually kidnap Daredevil's lover, his former lover, the Black Widow, who at the time, during this time, the Black Widow wasn't the sexy redheaded, sort of black leather character that we know her as now, but she was actually a sort of a reformed costumed hero, a costumed villain, and she became a superhero. But then she sort of was played up as a very big damsel in distress. So when she gets kidnapped by Bullseye, and then Daredevil has to rescue her. Another time I can remember is when Bullseye actually hijacks his TV station, and Daredevil has to stop him. But there are two things. Out of all the enemies, out of all the people that Daredevil has fought over the years, the one he absolutely despises the most is Bullseye. And there are two very good reasons as to why Daredevil has such an intense hatred for this guy. One of them is that during the incredible Frank Miller run on Daredevil, Bullseye was defeated by Daredevil again, and during one of his imprisonments, the Kingpin, who was his boss at the time, he actually hired Elektra to be his top assassin. When Bullseye found out about this, when he got out of prison, he was pissed off. Because Bullseye is the type of villain who has an enormous ego. I mean it. Like, you could say a lot of comic book villains are assholes, but Bullseye brings a new meaning to the word asshole. He is the embodiment of the asshole. And since he has such a huge ego, he decided that nobody can take that title away from him. So when he does this, he fights Elektra, and he overpowers her intensely. Like, Elektra is a great fighter and a great assassin, but she was simply no match for Bullseye, because the thing about Bullseye, on top of being probably the best shot in the entire Marvel universe, he's also one of the best hand-to-hand combatants. And he's easily a match for Daredevil himself, who is also one of the all-time great martial arts experts. And he beats Elektra badly. And when Elektra tries to deliver a killing stroke to him, he catches one of her sai, and he stabs her with her own sai and murders her. And I'll never forget the line that he says to Elektra whenever he kills her. He says to her, "You're good, but I'm magic." That's probably Bullseye's most famous quote in the entire comic book, Marvel comic world. In fact, it's so famous and it's so iconic that they actually used it in the live-action Daredevil movie. And Bullseye in that movie, when he's played by Colin Farrell, he says the exact same thing when he kills Elektra. Because that quote personifies Bullseye perfectly. And because of this, Daredevil fights Bullseye up very high in the New York skyline. Eventually he defeats Bullseye, and Bullseye seemingly falls to his death. But it turns out that his back is completely paralyzed after landing on something really hard, I guess, and a Japanese crime lord named Lord Darkwind collects him, and he implants adamantium into Bullseye's vertebrae, and thus making him even more tough and badass than he already is. And that's pretty much Bullseye's entire comic book origin right there. Well, shortly after that, Bullseye he became insane as he was diagnosed with sort of a brain tumor, and to the point where he actually saw everybody as Daredevil, and thus he started going on a killing spree because every person he saw basically became Daredevil for some reason. But the real Daredevil managed to take him down, and the tumor was surgically taken out of his brain. But one thing is for certain, no matter how silly of a storyline he shows up in, Bullseye is simply one of the all-time greatest villains who ever lived. That all of the smartass assassin villains, whether it be Deadpool, whether it be Deadshot, although I realize Deadshot is way older than Bullseye, but even still, even though I still consider Deadshot from DC Comics to be a better marksman. Sorry, I got cut off there. Yeah, basically what I was trying to say, despite the fact that I prefer the DC character Deadshot over a Bullseye, I can still admit Bullseye is just awesome. He's Bullseye is simply he's a fantastic character. He's a fantastic villain. He's simply one of the greatest asshole villains ever. And he literally he can hit something with such perfect accuracy. I mean, what has he done? He can take any item. It doesn't matter. It could be any household item, and he can kill someone with it. Whether it be like a CD disc, a paper clip, or even a plastic like soda bottle or something. He is good with any type of weapon. And he is simply one of the most dangerous, like unpowered villains in the whole Marvel universe. And he has been so tough that at times he proves to be too much for Daredevil and even too much for Spider-Man. Even a villain, even a hero who's as super powerful as Spider-Man. So yeah, what I'm trying to say here is that I'm not the biggest fan of Bullseye, but I still think he's an awesome character. He's not exactly he's definitely one of my favorites, but I'm not really as interested in him as most people are. But he's still an awesome character. He's still a great villain. Well, that's all I gotta say. Later.